So, let me tell you a little bit about my childhood, not that part. Because I remember being in the church of my childhood like it was yesterday. I came in with my parents, who were very involved in the Episcopal Church in Toledo, Ohio, a grand cathedral, I thought. On Sunday, they were usually ushering or handing things out, or I don't know what it is that they actually did. They were busy. We came in through the sanctuary and got to see the board where the list of the hymns were. The numbers changed every week, and I always wondered who got to change the numbers. It looked like a really fun job. My sister and I were taken down to the basement where the Sunday school was. The rooms didn't have any windows, but they had lots of kid-sized tables and chairs. I remember one of my Sunday school teachers, she had a big beehive hairdo that was the hallmark of the early 70s. We would do different activities. Many of them had to do with drawing or cutting out things. But honestly, I don't remember a single spiritual moment I had in that space. But Christmas. Oh, Christmas. Everyone got to worship in the sanctuary on that day. I remember the priest processing down the aisle with the cross, and we had to bow when the cross passed by. I didn't know why we did it, but I did the bowiest bow that ever had bowed when that cross came by because it felt important. And there were all of these different places that people were that stood up in the front. The priest sometimes stood up in front of the big table. I now know that's an altar. But sometimes he crawled up into a special cabin. That's what I thought it was. Up some stairs and stood way up higher than us and gave a whole bunch of words, and everyone seemed to think those were really important words. And sometimes there was another little podium where people who were not the priest spoke from there. They had their own podium. All of it was grand and beautiful and reverent, and I loved it. I loved the pageantry, the singing, the reciting the words together, the smell of the incense and the candles. It was amazing, and nothing like my Sunday school class. When we moved to a different state, we went to a United Methodist church. It was a different religion, but my experience was pretty similar. I still was down a hall, not in the basement, but in separate rooms, except on Easter. They did a sunrise service outside, and they let me play guitar for it. It was like camp on steroids, and I got to be a part of it. Again, I loved it. And it was nothing like my Sunday school. Fast forward to my adulthood, I wanted to take my kids to church, but I realized I really didn't know much about church. I felt like I was learning it all for the first time. I have learned a lot since then, but none of it was thanks to my upbringing, except for those major holidays that gave me a taste of the sacred and the communal rite of worship. Now, I still consider myself a lucky one. I didn't have some of the experiences that many of you have told me about. Nobody told me I was a sinner, although my grandparents' church did tell me that I wouldn't be saved if I didn't accept Jesus Christ as my Savior, but I didn't know what saved or a Savior was, so that was just weird. But I didn't have religion used as a weapon against me, as so many of you did as children. As far as I can remember, I didn't have any kind of hate for my fellow human instilled in me, as many of you did. And all of this leads me to one of my favorite Maya Angelou quotes, which is, "When you know better, you do better." And I wanted better for my kids when they were growing up, and I want better for our youth now. We know that all of us are born spiritual beings. Ask a 3-year-old. They go right from asking why cheese is yellow to asking why God let someone die. In fact, we often have our most profound spiritual discussions when we are children. We are learning to make sense of our world and our place in it, and spiritual communities are critical parts of that. At the beginning of last year, our first full year after the pandemic, we started having our children and youth be in the sanctuary for all of our service and putting children's ministries along with adult activities after the service. Our children's ministry team and I knew exactly why we were doing it, but I don't think we did a good job of explaining it to everyone else. I'm really sorry about that. I know it's late, but I want to explain it now. Some of it, honestly, was practical. We only had one service. We'd always had 2. We had no children's ministry teachers after the pandemic. Our staff was doing it all. We had a reduced budget, and we only had a few kids. And the volunteers we had before the pandemic taught during one service and then attended worship during the other one. Now they'd have to choose whether to teach or whether to worship. So there were some really compelling practical reasons. But they were undergirded by some solid human and faith development reasons also. We know that children absorb not only the messages of worship, but also the spirit of worship. This is where they learn what community looks like, just as we do as adults. And no one besides children are separated by their age. We are all learning together, no matter where we are on our faith development, our healing, and our beliefs. Now, I know that this has made some of you uncomfortable. We've experimented with different ways to manage the disruption, especially with some of our younger kids, especially with one of them. We are getting costs for turning the space back into a glassed-in wiggle room so kids can be included. We've gotten staff to take them in, to educate them about how to be in the space, to bring them in and out so that they can be learning how to be here. But we're not there yet. Honestly, none of us really are. This year, we've added 2 new things. We have a congregation member, bless her heart, who is willing to take our little ones out of service to a separate room where we can still have worship on the monitor so they can be part of it if they are not wanting to act or be worshipful. And the age for that is determined by the child. We have some children who are totally able to do it that are 2 or 3. And we have some 6 and 7 and 10-year-olds who are not. We're not making a strict rule on that at this point. We're letting the children select in that. And we are holding firmer to the rule that the chancel area here should only be for people participating in worship. We have 2 child care workers here in the sanctuary with us who will be working with the kids and also help reinforce that. Now, you need to know that our previous approach, which was to talk about it and model it, may have had a child on the chancel, but it didn't create a temper tantrum. This way may create more of a disruption, and we are still learning. I want to be very clear about the one child that people have mentioned. It is not about that child, nor is it about that child's parents. Some of you may have said to me, it's not Some of you have said, it's not all children, it's just one. To that I will say, there will always be that one. And by the way, there's always that one for many of the adults too. And we are all beautiful and worthy and loved. To scapegoat one human is a form of violence. We have had a number of children and adults who have been disruptive in our history. Those of you who have been here for a while may remember kids who pulled fire alarms during service, crawled under chairs, or snored during service. You'll have to guess what ages any of them are. And I want to talk about what message we send when we talk to a child or a family that we don't have a relationship with. I want you to imagine that we treat an adult who is snoring the same way. Imagine if a stranger were to come up to that person and tell them how they were to behave. Or worse, someone comes up to their partner to complain about their behavior. Do you think these people would return again? Do you think that they would feel welcomed? And in fact, we do now have a number of youth who I talk to who don't come to this congregation anymore because they were scolded when they were here. It is said that Sunday morning is the most segregated hour of the week. Churches are regularly segregated by class and race. And often they are segregated by age. Our very youngest people and our very oldest people are often excluded. Where we are right now with our children is choosing not to segregate them. We are doing this to explore what it means to be radically inclusive. Now, I know when that mission was created that many folks thought that it was mostly about race, but we have been exploring it so broadly. We've explored see how it includes people with different abilities, neurodiversity, class, gender expression, sexual orientation, and yes, age. So the challenge is this. Being radically inclusive for one group can mean less inclusive for another. How do we navigate that? It's something that we had to navigate and hear about when we were figuring out masking when we first came in. By saying we were going to be radically inclusive for people by masking, we were not including others who were upset about it. And I want to know what radically inclusive means to you, and if it means the same thing for you as it does for me. Because I think we meant for it to be race, and now we've got it in our mission, and we're like, well, what does this mean? Does it extend to everything? How far does it go? For me as your minister, it's an interesting challenge. My contract says that I report to the mission of this congregation. It is my guiding document. But like our Constitution, there are many different interpretations of it, right? As it is in our country, so it is here in our congregation. So what does radically inclusive mean? Is it inclusive to the majority, to those most affected? Are we pushing it further than you want me to? I mean, it is my job to push you, right? That is actually literally my job. And I want to hear if it's too far. I'm doing this with you, for you, among you. It's not all about me. I'm just the one trying to figure out where are we all trying to go. And I hear that from individuals. I want to make sure that people with dissenting views today have also their opportunity to be heard, all right? I know that I'm looking at all of you, I'm looking at some of you, and I know where some of you stand. There's a whole bunch of you, I have no idea where you stand. That's what I want to hear. That's what I want to know. To know what guides me so that you can understand where I am, I look at where the power resides. And then I side with who has less of it. It's actually a pretty clear guideline for me. It's not perfect, but I think it's fair for you to know how I'm looking at it. I also want to name here for the opportunity for us to figure out the difference between discomfort and inclusion. If we're striving to be truly radically inclusive, that means we need to examine our discomfort and explore who we are centering each time. I know all of us want ourselves to be centered. I do. But am I uncomfortable or am I not inclusive? It's messy and it's beautiful. It's the work that we're called to do here. I want to name a few conflicting messages I hear too here. I hear we're an aging congregation. We need to bring in new people, especially families. Here they are. Our children's ministry numbers have grown at a rate about 2 to 3 times the rate of growth of the adults in the congregation. I also hear, I wish we had more racial diversity in our congregation. Here they are. The majority of our youth are people of color. All of this should be a cause of celebration. And beloveds, we are actually leading our denomination in how we incorporate our youth already. We have 2 dynamic teens on our board of trustees who are bringing so much richness to our governance. They are not there just as figureheads. They talk more than most of the board. Board folks, can I get an amen? Our bylaws consider teens as members as soon as they go through coming of age or starting point. Just a few weeks ago, we were all participating in a blessing service. And who was doing the sacred work of blessing? Our youth. Not a minister, not adults, but our youth who knew how to bless people because they are so integrated into this community. Last Christmas, half of our orchestra was youth. This summer, we were led in worship by a youth. We have 2 youth as worship associates. I don't know about you, but how different would my life have been if I were told that I was worthy of giving blessings, serving on boards, and leading worship as a young person. Now, I still think we have work to do on our inclusion. It is a bold and difficult charge to have on our mission. When I saw this mission statement before I came, I was like, this is a congregation where I want to do the work. But it is bold. How can we be more radically inclusive to our seniors? Some who opt not to join us in person because they don't feel physically safe. We are not inclusive at all to those who have disabilities. I hope that we can have an accessible ramp into the front of our building during my ministry with you. We still have a lot of work to do with racial inclusion and reducing micro and macro aggressions. And I think we still have some learning to do around class inclusion, where our conversations don't center the exotic vacations we've traveled to lately. To be clear, I truly, really want to hear where you are. This is not a set destination, but rather a journey that we are on together. I am here to help us navigate this path, but if I'm not leading you where you want to go, I need you to tell me. There can be changes in the path. We have the most creative staff that you can imagine. We can figure out different ways to get there as long as we know the path that we're looking on. Maybe it takes us longer to get to the destination, but there are always different possibilities. And I know that we don't all have the same thoughts on this. So please treat each other with grace and curiosity and love, even if you disagree. It's not possible for many of us to do in the world of politics, but darn it, we can do it here. We can. And rather than focusing on the discomfort of where we are now, I want to articulate the destination where I think we're heading towards. It's one where children and youth are given messages that they are worthy and holy from their earliest ages. It is one where everyone gets to access the full range of spiritual growth and experience on Sunday. No one gets a watered-down theology. It's one where our youth get to be part of a spiritual community that will ground them for the rest of their lives. Is one where we are intentionally celebrating being a multi-generational congregation. It's where we don't even blink when a youth leads us up here from the pulpit, much less a wonderful youth in drag, because we are used to it and expect it. And it's where people of different generations not only share discussions, but become friends. And where we value the breadth of ages that we personally get to interact with, from profound conversations with a 90-year-old 1 minute and a 9-year-old the next. It is not easy. It takes creativity and adaptation, but we have the opportunity to live into our mission in more deeply and intentional ways each and every week. May our circle of love widen without limits. May each member of our community connect us to our past and guide us into our future. May the generations of this congregation serve each other and learn from each other. And may each and every one of us in this circle of faith have a deep, deep sense of belonging. May it be so.